We need to learn to be non-dependable. You know, a lot of times once we form relationships, especially romantic ones, we end up becoming very dependent on that other person, where we feel like if they do or say anything, it can completely change our whole day. Our whole mood can completely change based off this one person. And not saying that it's not reasonable. Like, of course, there'll be times where we'll allow our significant other to piss us off or whatever, and it ruins our day if it was like at the end of the day. But the whole day, you're allowing someone to dictate your whole entire day. Oftentimes, we even allow our significant other with our physical health, mental health. And it's just because we end up being too dependent on that other person. Or we feel like if we don't have them, or if we don't have their closure or reassurance, then we feel like we don't have anything. And it's often just because once we get in these relationships, we start to lose ourselves. Like, we slowly and slowly give every inch of our emotion to this other person, to the point where we have none left for ourselves. In doing this, it can cause so many problems, and it can make the relationship become so toxic. But y'all will never ever break up, and it will continue to be toxic just because of the dependency you have on the other person. No matter what the problem is y'all are having between each other, it's just gonna keep going just because of dependency. So we need to learn to be alone. How do you learn to be alone after being in a relationship with someone for a long period of time and just giving them all your emotion? You're gonna have to detach. You're gonna have to take your own space and be by yourself and learn to be by yourself again, because it's impossible when you're constantly texting your girlfriend or your boyfriend, constantly calling, all these things, seeing each other, which are nice, but there's a time and a place for all that stuff. It can't be 24/7, because once it becomes 24/7, you start losing yourself. And then everything, your mental, your physical, your spiritual health is all dependent and is dictated by your significant other and not by yourself anymore. So you just need to learn how to detach, and you can't allow yourself to get to that point, because there will always be problems in relationships, and some things that we don't recognize before we get in them is values. And we don't recognize our values, especially if it was our first relationship, just because of that excitement, you really want to get in one. But that's very important, and you want to make sure that it aligns, because no matter who you are, you cannot change the person you're in a relationship with. It will never change. That person will never change. It's a failing attempt. It's only a fantasy that's true. As long as you're in a relationship with someone and maybe they drink, they smoke, they party, they do all these, whatever the case may be, as long as they don't think those things are bad, maybe they don't value their health as much, or they value being friendly with other people, and that's part of their character trait, you can't change that person. You can't keep them inside. You can't stop them from drinking, and you can't stop them from smoking. You can't stop them from partying. Otherwise, you're a dictator in a relationship, and that's not a good trait to have. You want to be able to accept your significant other for their flaws. It's either you accept or you reject. And if you reject, that means you have to completely leave them alone and completely detach. If you accept, you have to love them for their flaws. You can't make a problem of a flaw that you already knew from beforehand. So if anything, the fault is on you. You can't make a problem and try to force something upon someone when you knew that's what it came with. But then you also have to be strong in your own values, because oftentimes these people try to peer pressure you into doing the same thing. As much as you're pushing for them to stop, they're pushing for you to start. They want they want to be able to do it with you. Since you don't like me doing it at all, if I do it with you, it can't be as bad. They start wording things differently, all to make you conform into crossing against your own values. So you have to stay strong in what you believe, because this oftentimes does happen. And it gets so bad to a point where, we start drinking with our significant other, or even with friends. This is not just for a relationship, but even with friends, new friends especially. Start drinking with our significant other, smoking with them, whatever. And we're doing this just because they won't change. And they won't change. It doesn't matter how many times you bring it up, how it affects you. It doesn't matter. They'll always pressure you into doing what you don't want to do. The same way you're pressuring them to do what they don't want to do. So before you get in a relationship, recognize your values, recognize the other person's values. This is a relationship between friends and partners. And determine whether if this is a good enough fit for you. Because if it's not, you're gonna be putting yourself down a rabbit hole. And unless you have full control over yourself, it'd be very difficult for you to be able to control yourself once you start falling into conformity. Because then that's when you start drinking alone. It gets so bad to a point you start drinking alone and doing all these things alone. You have to remember that these people don't know you. It doesn't matter who you are, who you date, who you become friends with. They don't know you. Think of life as like seasons. Right now, I'm in my 18th season. I'm 18 years old. Well, a lot of my friends only track back to maybe 7 seasons ago. My ex-girlfriend only tracks back to 1 season ago. So they don't really know you. No one knows you better than yourself. So once you start recognizing the fact that maybe you're too attached to somebody else, you're allowing that person to dictate your emotions, your physical health, your spiritual health, you need to start to learn how to be alone again. In being alone, you need to recognize your values. You need to make sure that they're aligned and they're still strong. And if you're with someone who does pressure you into doing things that you do not want to do, and they know this, stay away from them. Relationship, partner, whatever, stay away from them. Because it'll only do you bad. Don't hang around people that have no good purpose for you. If you can't think of 5 good reasons why this person should stay in your life, what they've done for you, you're wasting yours and their time. So remember that before we start forming new relationships, before we start getting in new romantic relationships, don't lose focus on your values. Stay strong. Learn to detach if you feel that you're too attached to this person, too clingy to this person, and learn to make sure that, or remember that you cannot change your person or your friend. You cannot change them. As long as they don't want to be changed, you cannot change them. So don't attempt, because you will fail. And it will put you down in the worst way possible. It will put you down. You will feel disappointed knowing that you failed. But you only failed not because you weren't good enough and you weren't a good enough teacher or example, but you failed just because the person you're trying to teach does not want to be taught. The person you're trying to change does not want to be changed. So remember that before you form these values. And thank you for watching, and God bless.